Hi, Jim. Chris, are we ready to go? All right, welcome to the March 24th ARPA committee meeting. And first thing we'll do today, establish a quorum. So let's see, we have one online, I believe. Is he on yet? He is not on yet. Okay, John Rogers is supposed to be on, so we'll hopefully get him on soon. Scott Willis?
Here.
Troy?
Here.
Misha? Here. And I'm here, and we're still waiting for him. And we do have Dustin Meeks, our legal counsel, here today, who will be helping us out. Thank you for being here, Dustin. Still not seeing John. Chris, can you text him? Thank you. We'll give him just a minute if that's okay. Thank you. Okay, well, while we're waiting, let's see if we can have the approval of the meeting minutes from June 16th. It's been quite a while. Thank you, Scott, for doing those minutes for us. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I guess we're all here that are here. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The minutes are approved. And while we're waiting for John, hopefully he gets on, Dustin, can you give us a summary of the changes to the guidance from Treasury? I know that there has been a number of changes.
Yeah, so since the committee's last meeting in June of last year, there have been sort of two significant changes to ARPA and Treasury's regulatory guidance implementing ARPA. The first of those changes, which is really for Westfield's purposes, the only significant set of changes, occurred in July of last year. Treasury put out a new version of their frequently asked questions, which is a document that they use to interpret the final rule. The FAQs are not themselves a promulgated regulation by Treasury, but they are sort of semi-binding explanation that Treasury puts out. So Treasury is telling you this is how we're going to read the final rule. And in those FAQs, they made sort of three important changes, particularly to the expenditure of funds in the revenue loss category. And as a reminder for the committee members, Westfield's award is of the size that all of your dollars are being spent in that revenue loss category. So those three sets of changes were first, that Treasury adjusted their approach to making loans using funds that are identified with revenue loss. Under the final rule, as Treasury sort of was initially interpreting it, loans that extended beyond December 31st, 2026 in terms of final maturity were not permitted. The reason being that Treasury was taking sort of a strong view that the program ended on December 31st, 2026, and that a loan of the funds was not expending the funds. In those FAQs, Treasury has changed their interpretation so that funds expended in the revenue loss category can be loaned for periods that extend beyond December 31st, 2026. And when you do make a loan using revenue loss funds, you also are not subject to the provisions of the Uniform Guidance on Federal Awards that would treat principal and interest paid back on a loan of federal funds as what's called program income. So program income generally under the Uniform Guidance has to be expended in the same way that the federal award monies would have been spent. So in sort of a prior to the FAQ change world, if you made a loan as principal and interest came back, those dollars come back as ARPA dollars, if you will. And so you have to figure out how to re-spend them again before December 31st, 2026. Now, under this new regime, you have the ability to make long-term loans of the funds, and as principal and interest are paid back, they come back as general revenues of the city. So that is now an option. It also frees up the ability to do revolving loan funds. So previously, it was functionally impossible under the program to capitalize a revolving loan fund using the ARPA funds, and now that is something that you can do structurally in the program. The second major change was a change to the way that Treasury treats subrecipients. So we've discussed in previous meetings that individuals or groups that were receiving monies in the forms of grants from the city to pursue some specific purpose, right, to undertake a project, program, or service on behalf of the city, that those individuals would be subrecipients, and that subrecipients have sort of a flow-down compliance obligation to expend the funds as if they were the city in terms of compliance with the uniform guidance and those kind of things. After the FAQs changed in July, Treasury has taken the position that in the revenue loss category, there's no such thing as a subaward, meaning that you can give money to folks to undertake a project, program, or service, and those people who are receiving the money will not be subrecipients. So you now have the ability to work through a third party to undertake some eligible use that you could do in the revenue loss category, which is of course quite broad, and they will not be subject to compliance in the way that the city would be. So the funds are viewed as expended at the point of making a grant when you're operating in the revenue loss space. And then the last change was a change to the way that Treasury is applying certain portions of the Uniform Guidance on Federal Awards, which is the universe of regulations promulgated by the Office of Management and Budget for the general operation of federal award programs. They're sort of the hardest piece of compliance that we've been dealing with over the course of this program. The changes that they have made are that 3/5 of the sections of the Uniform Guidance no longer apply, including the single audit component of the Uniform Guidance. What they have retained are one tiny piece of the federal procurement regulations, which require compliance with state law in the expenditure of these funds, and then the provisions of what they call the cost principles, which are the portions of the regulation that dictate what costs are allowable or not. And the only portions of the cost principles that they've retained are those portions which require essentially reasonableness.
Does that free up the hold back that we were thinking about?
In terms of the, are you talking about the 10%
Yeah.
Audit reserve? So that guidance, that number comes from the State Board of Accounts, and I was talking with Cindy earlier today that I'm hopeful to connect with SBOA's general counsel, and in light of how far we are into the program, and also
Because these are federal funds, and federal funds usually would, I mean, in most cases, would dictate over state.
Right. Well, SBOA's guidance on the 10% was really, I think, a risk management measure and assuring for audit costs. And I anticipate that I'm hopeful that this conversation with SBOA will lead to them sort of saying,
okay,
we have changed our mind on that 10%. They've not put out new guidance. But I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get kind of an agreement from them that something significantly lower than 10% is appropriate now, because the program has gotten much easier to do compliance well with. And then also, we've made it this far without compliance issues. So I'm hopeful that to be able to report back that number can be substantially reduced and those funds can be freed up. I'm also hopeful to have the conversation with them about what our plan is in terms of, as we get closer to the point at which the funds need to be incurred for some purpose, eliminating that reserve so that ultimately 100% of the funds are incurred to an eligible purpose. But I haven't been able to have that conversation yet. The other change that has occurred, Congress adopted an amendment to the ARPA legislation itself in the omnibus spending bill at the end of last year. And the changes that they made were to essentially add 2 eligible use categories outside of the revenue loss space, which is disaster relief response, and then they listed a giant universe of federal infrastructure legislation that if you had a project that qualified for those federal infrastructure laws, that functionally, like ARPA would view up to $10 million as expendable, co-eligible with those programs. That change is really substantial for, you know, like the city of Los Angeles or the city of Indianapolis, where almost all of their award is not revenue loss. But for Westfield, you were able to do all of those things anyway, because anything that they added in there was already in the universe of government services. So that omnibus change doesn't really impact you. There will be additional Treasury guidance based upon that omnibus change, and I will digest it and certainly let you know if there's anything that comes in that guidance that would be impactful for Westfield. But that's kind of the universe of both of the major changes that we've seen to the law and to the regulations, and it's really all good news, particularly with the FAQs. The sort of bottom line is that the city now has an ability to expend the funds in compliance with Indiana law and not have to worry about the additional difficulties of federal procurement, most of the uniform guidance. And I think that is going to be a monumental help, particularly for the infrastructure projects that are planned and the Y project. So.
Great, yeah, I'm sure that our Public Works Department will be happy to know about that change.
Yes, yeah. Yes, luckily they were already planning to comply with Indiana Public Purchasing and Public Works law, so they should have no trouble with that.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate that summary, and it seems like most of it doesn't really change much of what we're doing. I mean, I don't think we have significant changes there, but leads me to our next item of discussion, which is updating our plan to reflect the changes since we did that. It was kind of in the middle of last year, if I remember correctly. And just to announce, we had approved those nonprofit grants that went out, and we did have one organization that chose to not accept the funds, which was for about $13,000 something, I believe. I might have that a little off, but that was Young Life, and there was some issues that they didn't agree with in terms of our agreement with legal, and so their legal and ours did not come to terms, and they chose to not accept the funds. So I just wanted to let you guys know that, and to know that that would then be available to put elsewhere within the program. And what I am kind of advocating for is that that amount, I know it's not very significant, but the drainage issues that we have in our downtown, that total project is going to far exceed what Public Works is getting from this program. And so, I mean, it would help from a city perspective to be able to direct those funds there.
That sounds good.
Yeah. And so we need to amend our plan. I don't know if everyone has it in front of them. When we approved it, we only did the first tranche. In what is in our plan right now, we need to account for that second tranche that we received. We've already had the discussion with council about the pledge to the Y, and that was going to be with that second tranche primarily, as well as a little bit from this past one. So that's kind of already, you know, a done deal with council and needs to be reflected in the actual amended plan. And we can make the change then for that 13,000+ that's not going to be in the nonprofit then, and move that if this committee is willing to do that, or if you have other ideas, we need to discuss them. That will be one of the changes that we need to have in that plan as we amend it. So structurally, if we could talk about that right now and give Dustin the exact charges to do for our draft ordinance, that would be helpful.
I saw Scott shaking his head too. I mean, Misha, I mean, is there, I think
It makes sense.
yeah.
We still don't have John on, right?
But we
got
have
him.
4 out of 5,
We
right?
got
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Do
So
we need to make a motion on that, or are we just gonna roll it, or what do we gotta do on that?
we should probably make a motion to make it official.
I make a motion to move the excess dollars to the public works service drainage expense
I'll second that.
or something like that.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
So Troy, your motion is to move the, and I don't have the exact number, it is 13,000.
13,000?
13,000, it's the amount that was supposed to go to Young Life.
Okay.
And to move that to the Public Works line within this, which is otherwise known in our plan as Water, Sewer, and Broadband Infrastructure Development. Is that where we included it, or did we change that with the revenue? I'm sorry, and I'm screwing up your motion. I want to make sure we have
No.
it directed to the exact right place.
That's a good move. That's perfect.
I think it's, well, it'll all live in revenue loss. Those words are the magic words for a different expenditure category, but I know that we're not putting anything not in the revenue loss category, so I'm following.
Yeah.
I will not, yeah, I got that.
Perfect.
We're good on my account.
Wordsmith that, right?
You got it.
Okay. So I appreciate your help on that too, Dustin. Because again, we have the summary and it's got wording there, and then we have the specifics further in the plan, so that's what I'm trying to account for. Okay, so we have that motion in a second, and we'll just call the roll on that. Scott?
Yes.
Troy?
Yes.
Misha? Yes. And me, yes, and John is still not on, so, okay. So we will pass that on to, I'll work with Dustin if that's okay, and we'll get those changes. One last request there, does this committee feel the need to see that back here in its draft form before it goes to council?
I do not.
Would that be required for any reason, Dustin?
No, I can't think so. I mean, ultimately, the council is who's making the decision. So as long as the committee feels okay with the council seeing it
Okay,
on
good.
principle, I think that's fine.
Won't hold it up then, okay. Good, we will work on that. And are there any other changes that we want to reflect in the plan other than adding in the second tranche that we received? Wasn't there the additional amount, it was the amount given to all the NEUs in addition to, it was a very small amount, I was talking with Dustin earlier.
Yeah, so just to explain that, the state received a large chunk of money from the federal government for all of the non-entitlement units in the state, and they distributed it down pursuant to the formula, that decides how much. But certain units in the state didn't take the steps that were required to receive their money, and so, and this happened in every state, there was money left over at the end, and so the state basically just ran the formula again to decide what portion of that leftover money each of the units that did take the steps to get their money would get. And so you got a little tail end to the first tranche from the unclaimed funds.
If I recall, that was like 16,000 or
Yeah, it wasn't a bunch of money.
I don't remember what month we got that last year. And right now, I would advocate that that go back into the, of course, the revenue loss.
Right.
Hold on to that, okay. Are we okay to move on, unless we need this exact amount from Misha for any reason?
Probably not. I think around the 18,000, but it's you say we're not gonna expect another small amount, right? This is it, right? All the revenue, this is it.
I,
We have a two
I,
payment.
That's close enough.
And plus a small payment.
I believe so. I'm not,
Okay,
I'm
so
not
means that we're not
anticipating
gonna get
another.
anything. I believe, last one is more $18,000 we got. $18,650.89. Beside the $4 million one, so if you don't expect another one, I think that this is a bottom final, $9,892,047.20. That's all we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
And we didn't spend as much, expected, we only nonprofit and the legal fee, that's it so far. And there was only one PO outstanding, I told you about that $335,500, the drainage PO. It's just a setup, but it's not spent yet.
right. So, I mean, now, they will have until 2026, actually. I mean, as long as it's encumbered by 2024, right?
Yes, so as long as the city has entered into some binding agreement to expend the funds by December 31st, 2024, it'll be fine. So you have 2 years for those contracts to be paid out, as long as there's some agreement binding those funds to be expended.
2024, December 31st?
December 31st, 2024, yep.
Awesome. All right, am I missing anything, Dustin, that we need to have you clear up for the plan, the amended plan?
No, I think that's everything that I was aware of that the committee had in terms of their priorities. I'll work with Misha just to make sure that all of the numbers and dates are right in the plan
Yes.
document.
Oh, one thing I take back, we have a premium pay for 2020.
Right.
We forgot, that one is less than what we expected too, so, or 29,914.79. So that was accounted, so far we expense the premium pay and the legal pay and the nonprofit pay. That's it. Nothing committed yet. Except that I told you PO.
Right, so the biggest chunks, if you will, for the public works, and, I mean, we have that 335 PO, but
That's it.
that's it, okay. All right. I'm thinking that's going to change this year. We'll see those expenditures happen this year.
Have to be this year.
Yes.
Also, Dustin, is it April 30th? Is a deadline by?
Yeah, so the project and expenditure report for the period from April 1st of 2022 to March 31st, 2023 will be due on April 30th of this year. But it should be the same simplified report that we had last year. So no additional difficulties this year. It will just be the project and expenditure report. When you're operating exclusively in revenue loss, will just require identifying projects, identifying amounts incurred, and then identifying amounts expended. So that should be the whole enchilada, if you will.
Okay, your phones are gonna be with me.
Happy to help.
Which you're jumping the gun, Misha. We actually had the downtown stormwater update, which I was hoping to get from Public Works, and they were supposed to get me a written report because they're both out of town, but I never received a written report. So we do have knowledge that they at least have this $335,000 PO to at least get some of that project started, if you will. So I guess that's our update for now. If I do get further information, I will pass it on to the committee members so we can know what's going on, and at our next meeting, whenever that will be, we'll make sure that we hear from them.
Thank you.
All right, so yes, that annual report and the information requirements, it sounds like we don't even need to really discuss that in depth. You guys did do it last year, Misha, you, John, and Dustin, I think, put that all together, did you not?
Oh, yeah, I couldn't do without Dustin. Only his help.
That's good.
I know, and they've done a lot of work for us behind the scenes, and so we greatly appreciate that. We're lucky to have you on for this. Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to serve.
Thanks. Let's see, there is one thing I would like to bring up before we hit up other committee members. We will need to be hearing from the nonprofits soon with those reports. If you recall, when we gave out those grants, there were certain reports required based on their use of those funds. So I will be reaching out to them to see if we can get follow-ups and get those reports just to know how those dollars have been spent according to their plan that they gave us. That's okay for everybody?
So for the nonprofit grants, those are viewed for Treasury's reporting purposes as expended at the point of making the grant, because they are beneficiaries, and that was true even before. So they would have been considered expended at the point of making the grant before these FAQ changes. It's sort of extra true under the FAQ changes. So we will not have to report in detail their expenditures in our report, but the reporting from the nonprofits is good and helpful for the city to have in your file, basically tracking the dollars expended down through the point at which they were expended on their program purpose, which is supporting the operations of those nonprofits. So they won't get reported to Treasury, but they are helpful for the program file.
That's great to know.
Well, and I like when we can just highlight these nonprofits and they can be letting the whole community know how they're using those resources, and then maybe they'll want to give even more.
Yeah.
So there's that. Okay. Does anyone have any comments that they would like to share?
Nope.
All right. I don't know when we need to have our next meeting, so if we can just hold off scheduling that until we know what we need to do and when and why, I'll reach out to everybody when we're closer to something, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
All
Hey,
right.
Cindy, I do have one quick question.
Oh, great.
YMCA, the contracts, is she the one drawing that up, or is it gonna be
Yeah.
Manny, or is it gonna be Barnes, or who's
So-
taking it on?
Manny and Ann, I think, are both involved in that, and I didn't bring that to the committee because it's the whole of the council that's entering into that agreement, if you will, and we've been the one discussing that. So that is now sitting with the city's legal, and we're figuring out that. We were waiting for their second review. They have like a new chief or something over there, their development officer, and they've had some changes over there, so.
A few changes.
There's been a few holdups there, but I know the project is still moving along. And they have postponed their groundbreaking a few times, so there's not been, a dire need to get that done, but now we are getting to the point that needs to get done.
Yeah, they went back to the drawing table, couldn't get the project and budget. So looking at a new CM and trying to take another angle at it, so we'll see.
Right. And so, but it is still moving, and
Yes.
so our pledge still stands. So just so everyone's aware of that. And with nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Bye.
Great, thanks, everybody.